Well, I hope you enjoyed this record of our trip on the windsurf from Venice, sailing through the Mediterranean to Lisbon in October and November of 2019. We started in Venice, which, as you can see from this photo, although it's fabulous place, a confusing maze of alleyways and canals. There you can see our Hotel Becher, which is fairly central. And here is how you get from the airport to your hotel in Venice. You take a water taxi and you just enjoy the views. Here we are arriving at the hotel dock, and that's the manager waiting for us. That's the Hotel Becher. The big balcony you see is our room. And this is a view from the room. And being Venice, there are glass shops everywhere, some good, some bad, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. We took a guided tour to Murano and several other the islands in the Bay of Venice. These are some shots that we took exploring those islands. The island of Burano has been famous for lace making for years, hundreds of years. Here we are at the Museum of Lace. And these shots are all taken on the island of Mazzorbo. This is an art park full of various sculptures, some of which were really neat. And this is pulling into the island of Murano, where all the glass is made. And this is something we saw. One of our favorite things to do is sit on the hotel dock, have a coffee, and watch the world go by. This is what we saw. A never-ending procession. Nice little boat.
Okay, no.
And this is in the hotel room at the end of a busy day. This is the first of several trips to the market with Chef Stefan. They're always interesting and informative. In Split, we took a tour organized by Windstar to see the sights of both Split and a close village by the name of Trogir. These photos are taken on that day. This is walking the back streets of Trogir looking for lunch, and where we found out that a Trogir sausage roll is a hot dog. Alright, here we're on the tender heading to Dubrovnik. We've been to Dubrovnik before, we love it. The amazing thing is that this old town was virtually flattened in the Civil War about 20 years ago, and it has all done such an amazing job rebuilding it, you wouldn't know that it had ever been damaged. And coming up is the man who made the frogs. On the days the ship was at anchor, the sports platform was open at the back, so of course I had to try it. The day in Kotor was another Windstar organized excursion, looking at the sights of Kotor and some surrounding villages. Again, as you can see these photographs, another interesting day. This day was a sea day, so we had a leisurely breakfast. There's Robert, our friendly waiter, having a leisurely breakfast on deck, which we certainly enjoyed. And then we had a bow pulpit experience where people took turns having their photos taken. And after that, we went and bothered the crew in the bridge and asked them questions and had a look around. It was all very fun. We woke up the next day with a view of Mount Etna out our porthole. You can see it smoking away in the distance. We were anchored at Giardini Nexus. Again, a day of exploring Taormina and other mountaintop villages. And again, here are some photos of what we saw and did that day. It was a long slog up a long hill to see the Roman ruins, and Mom was sure glad when we got there. And here I am finally getting my glass of fresh squeezed pomegranate juice. And then, of course, time for another gelato. As we're leaving, time for a last look at Taormina, the town we were at that afternoon. Well, today was my birthday. So again, another leisurely breakfast, looking at the town of Sorrento in the background, watching the passing fishermen, just generally taking life easy before we headed to town and spent the day exploring. As you can see, another interesting old town. Tendering back to the ship, we noticed that the sports platform, or the marina as they call it, was open, so I thought I'd take some photographs so you can get a better idea of the facilities there. Portoferraio was our next stop. This is a town on the island of Elba off the coast of Italy where Napoleon was exiled in the early 19th century. Again, beautiful weather, calm seas. And today we took a Windstar excursion to Napoleon's summer house where he was exiled up in the hills. This is for Hunter, this is the stables. And next we have a view of his kitchen and his bathroom. Then we had to look around town and another gelato before heading back to the boat. Trying, and there she goes. The last little bit of energy disappearing into the ship. Go on, Bonds. Today in Genoa was the only day of the whole 3-week cruise that we saw any rain at all. So we took a hop-on, hop-off bus ride around the town. Pretty much stayed on the bus all the time. And as you will see in the next photograph, we had the entire bus to ourselves. Pretty neat. And after that, we went to the Maritime Museum and had a look around. There were some real interesting parts of Genoa, but I'm afraid around the harbor was not one of them. I believe they're in the process of rebuilding a lot of those buildings. Well, this morning we woke up in Monaco. We had a bit of a slow start, and then we took a Windstar trip to Nice and explored again the town, the market, and everything interesting there was to see in Nice. A good day. And here's some samples of what we saw. Some wild flavors of gelato there. This old fellow's peeking out his window at all the commotion down below. That hilltop town is St. Paul de France. Amazing place, hasn't changed in hundreds of years. Cars aren't allowed in. It's virtually unchanged other than it is now full of art galleries and artist studios. Amazing place to walk around. And some fabulous views from the top of the walls around the city. Again, some of the buildings, some of the art studios, some of the fabulous old doorways, and some of the incredibly narrow laneways that are only a shoulder's width wide. And then again, back to the boat to write our journal and take off our shoes. Next day was, as you see, Sanary-sur-Mer in France. Again, this was our second trip to the market with Chef Stefan. Same thing, look around. I bought a lot of fruit and vegetable this time, a real scenic fishing village. We're now in Cadix in Spain, an interesting fishing village. I taped this, I thought it was fascinating, where the ferry pulled right up onto the shore, let people off and on. Yeah, and when I saw this, I just grabbed the camera, and it's a bit jiggly, I'm afraid, but I thought it was something Steve, I could just see Steve trying to do this. So we spent a few hours here at Salvador Dali's house. He lived here from the 1930s till the 1980s, and when his wife died, and at that point he got up and left and never came back, left everything behind him and just gone on with his life. Back in Barcelona. We didn't have too long here, but it was the day of, again, walking around looking at the sights. I had to go to the market for lunch. And we explored the old Gothic quarter of the city, which we really enjoy. And then it was back to the boat because we were leaving fairly early. I think about 5 o'clock or so, the boat was leaving. As you can see, the boat was getting ready for Halloween. Next day, Palma de Mallorca, which is an island off the coast of Spain. Another fabulous cathedral. Included a few shots. We did a tour of their museum, and there were some things in there, including it's the largest candelabra I've ever seen in my life. There's a pair of those. And it was quite impressive the way the light was coming through the stained glass windows and illuminating the interiors. We've seen so many impressive cathedrals and churches this trip, but this was one of the best. And again, it was doing what we do best, exploring the old town, just hanging out, having a gelato, seeing what there was to see. That was put out for the local dogs. And Grandma found a second-hand shop. And we saw this place called Toronto. We had to go there and we had lunch. And here's Mum teasing the horses. So the next day was Cartagena on the south coast of Spain. Here we did a walking tour around the old town, stopping for various tapas at 1-2 tapa bars. With a group from Windstar. This was the Roman Forum. And at the end of the day, the group of us sat down and had something to eat at a table. Next day in Almeria, unfortunately this was November the 1st, All Saints Day, which is a real big deal in Spain, and virtually nothing was open, so the ship wasn't there too long anyhow. We had to walk around and I'd look and then end up going back to the boat fairly early. Alright, today was in Malaga, started off well. As you can see, we woke up to a rainbow. And this was our third trip to the market. There we are, the group is following Chef Stefan here, who's buying all the ingredients for the paella they're making later that day. We were trying custard apples for the first time. And here were the crew waiting to take all the purchases back to the ship. After that, we had a look around town and then went to a really interesting museum of daily life and occupations of the sort of 18th, 19th century, all housed in a wonderful old mansion around a central courtyard. It was really neat. We spent a couple of hours there. It was a really neat place, and of course, it's made your Mum's day to see this collection. That night it was Windstar's famous deck barbecue. They do this once a cruise. To give you an idea, it was a fun evening. And as it was dark, all the buildings in town were illuminated. And it was, you see behind us, quite a nice way to finish off the day. That's the paella we bought the clams and the shrimp and the mussels for, and some of the waiters that we got to know. And I guess that's the sort of views we had in the background. Well, so the next day we woke up to the Rock of Gibraltar. And again we did another, here's the captain docking. We did an excursion with Windstar. In the background you can vaguely see some land. That's Africa across the Straits of Gibraltar. And that's sort of looking down at the ship in the harbor. This is St. Michael's Caves, which is a fascinating formation, which we did a tour of. And then from there we went outside and up the rock and saw the famous Barbary maquettes, which are the monkeys that supposedly, as long as they're present, the British will control Gibraltar.
We kick our young out at 5 months, so I promise you, I'm coming back as a Barbary macaque monkey. Privileged lives, living like kings. You can see they're in exceptionally good physical condition. What is so wonderful is they are on the endangered list. Over on the Barbary coast where they come from, deforestation, predators and very dispersed food is causing real problems, and their species are not surviving. Here, actually,
well, we're getting to the end of the cruise. There's Cadiz is our last stop. Really, again, a real interesting city. Again, the usual. We went for an unstructured walk around town to see what we could see. We ended up at, yet again, another amazing cathedral. And spent our time in the museum. They had a really great museum attached to this one, so I've just included some shots of some of the better things in the collection. And here, coming up, that, believe it or not, was the washroom in the cathedral. And this was an amazing collection of massive illustrated books. That's the sort of thing they were inside them. And there are some friends we made on the boat from Quebec. Then later that day we had a tour of the galley, again with Chef Stefan, really great guy from Romania. Some of the cooks and the pastry chef, working away, working hard. Which brings us to Lisbon. The cruise was over. First day we did a tuk-tuk ride, 5 hours bouncing around in a tuk-tuk. Sounded like a good idea, but it was a bit uncomfortable. Again, some more grand buildings. Lisbon's built on hills, and this is pretty typical of what we found. This is a monastery, this one. And this is where the Portuguese tarts originated, in Belém, which is just on the outskirts of Lisbon. Here we are enjoying fresh from the oven, pastéis de Belém. They make tens of thousands of these a day. And then from there it was around, that's the Tower of Belém, sort of 15th century tower. And we spent the day looking at various monuments and historical sites in Lisbon. This is our tuk-tuk driver. That's a tuk-tuk we spent a few hours in. He took some photos of us. Here, walking the back streets of the Alfama district. Mum made a new friend. This was the area where the fishermen used to live. It's one of the few sections of the city that survived a massive earthquake in 1745, and it is just a rabbit warren of little streets. That last one, that's the wash house where all the people used to gather and do their clothes. Which brings us to the Gulbenkian Museum, which was, again, for us, one of the highlights. It's just amazing. He was an oil broker, an Armenian oil broker, and he made millions and millions and built up this fabulous collection, which he left to the city. These are just a few random highlights of photos I snapped on the way around. Just a small fraction of what there was in the museum. That's a René Leake bronze-framed floor mirror. This was one of the highlights, all of the Leake jewelry from the early part of the century. Just fabulous things that you never see, didn't even know existed. All on a massive scale. All these are 4, 5, 6 inches long across, enameled, carved ivory, gilded metal. Had a room full of carved and stained ivory and hardstone. And this was lunch in the gardens of the Gulbenkian, and then we're, this is one of the main squares. That's our hotel up on the top floor. That's where we were staying. And this is the Pink Street, which used to be a real rowdy part of town, and now it's become a bit more civilized. And here's Mom looking at yet another set of stairs. One of the highlights for us, the Time Out Market. We had dinner here 4 nights in a row. It's a vast, vast warehouse. All around the outside are booths run by well-known chefs, well-known restaurants, every cuisine you can imagine. Great place. There's Mum waiting for me to come back with our dinner. And this was yet another excursion. Sintra is just outside Lisbon. It's this fantastic royal palace that was used by the last kings of Portugal in the 19th century. So that was our tour guide, nice girl, and one of the last things we did. And this was lunch in the town of Sintra. And this is the lady that made those little spoons. There's a fishing village, Azenas do Mar, where surf was pounding. And apparently at times of the year, that was one of the great surfing places. And again, this is all the same day. And this was our last stop of the day. Again, another fishing village turned into tourist area. And the last day went Thieves Market in the morning and the National Tile Museum after that. So on the way back, we ran into the hotel, we ran into this street art, and that pretty much is it.